Hey everyone, Stuart Bradley here. We're going to talk about converting internships into full-time offers. And what follows this introduction is an interview with me and my student about how to do that in her specific situation. And by the way, if you haven't yet, please like and subscribe to this video and this channel. I would really appreciate it. It helps support the channel. So 3 points that we're going to cover here in this upcoming interview. Number 1, having the intention and why that's helpful. Number 2, who to speak to about converting the internship. And then 3, how to set up that conversation and execute that flawlessly. I will see you on the inside. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, so being in an internship and then looking to convert that, the first place I would start would be to have a conversation with your manager, with your direct boss. Now, your direct boss may not be the one that ultimately makes that decision, but that's where what they call raise the flag up the flagpole, right? Yeah. So they raise the flag and they see if there's a head count. So your boss may or may not have the head count information or the authority. It can depend, but that's probably the place to start. So whether or not there is an opportunity for full-time or anything like that, it's good to have a kind of halfway conversation, halfway through the internship or touch base meeting with the manager. So let's say that every week you are starting the week with your understanding of your list of tasks communicated to that manager, or every Friday you send a message to your manager saying, I've completed these tasks for the week. This is what I'm looking forward to doing next week, or whatever your communication style is with the manager. Whether there's a lot of it or a little of it, or somewhere in between, you want to find a time to sit down with the manager. And what I would just generally say is get some feedback. So it's not, hey, can we have a meeting about sponsorship or full-time work? It's, hey, I'd love to sit down and have a coffee with you to talk about how things have been going in the internship, and if you have any feedback for ways that I can support you and the team better. I would always run this up the flagpole. So I would always first speak with your direct manager, because they would want to feel like they were the boss of you and they were the one making the decisions. The opportunity is to have your next manager meeting. And before that meeting, say, hey, as part of this meeting, in addition to discussion about the projects that we're working on, could we add to the agenda a short discussion about how you feel things have been going, and if there's any opportunity to improve or support the team better? And there may not be, or there may be, but that is just so you can block off a short few minutes on the agenda, or add that as an agenda item. And then in that discussion, then you reveal at that time your interest in the possibility of a return offer. So you talk about the feedback, you collect the feedback, good or bad, right? It's always good. But whatever the feedback is, you say, that's great, I really appreciate it. I'm going to plan to keep doing this or do this thing better. And part of the reason why I'm asking is because I would really love to return here in a full-time capacity after the summer. So get that agenda on the calendar and then on as an item. And so it'll be a little bit different than the routine. And so it's always a process of gaining permission. So you gain permission to have that discussion. Then in the conversation, you ask about your interest in converting this to a full-time role. And then as part of that, you ask, yeah, this is my interest. And you kind of read their body language. Is this person engaging you and having, are they engaged in that conversation? What are they saying? And then the question you ask is, if that's a possibility, what would be the next steps.
Mm-hmm.
What would be the next steps? So not to presume that there's a spot, not to assume that it's a yes or a no, or just make no assumptions. Just ask about what the next steps would be. And then they'll say something like, that's an interesting idea. I could, in terms of headcount, I'll have to do this, this, or this. Or we could discuss that, or I can explore that. They may or may not mention that this is a matter for the vice president or whatnot. They'll ask what the next steps are. And if they say, well, this is a discussion that has to be brought up with the vice president, then you would ask a follow-on question, which would be, okay, that sounds good. What would be the right way to initiate that conversation? So, and the right way, meaning hopefully they'll say, well, we need to talk to the boss, talk to the vice president, and I can have that conversation. Or, well, you could bring that up in your conversations with the vice president when you meet him or her at your next meeting. So that's the permission to then do the next thing. And that's something that, I could easily screw that up. I mean, I'm somebody who easily would screw up these conversations and just make errors of judgment about, going over people's heads or things like that. So, I mean, I know that I've made those mistakes. So part of just observing that is showing that you know how to be a good employee. You know how these things work in the organization. You know at which levels decisions are made, and you understand not to try to jump levels and things like that. So I would say have that conversation. Don't assume there's a yes or a no there. We have to find out. HR is just going to do whatever the bosses say. So
Right.
it's okay to ask HR. Like you said, you'd ask HR, hey, is there this possibility? And they'll bounce the question back to you and say, well, we have to find out. Sometimes the conclusion might be, well, we haven't had the chance to see how you perform to really make a decision. So that's a valid concern. And I would actually think that's okay to bring up in your conversation. So, I really would like to, in terms of how I'm performing here and how I can be effective for you. I've realized that it's only this week that I've been able to get through the permissions needed to start actually doing what I think would be helpful to you. And that's my perception. You might perceive me as being in one way or another. I have a concern is that I'm actually would like to have more work here. And is there a way to give me more work in the balance of the internship time that's available? It means a lot that they've brought you into the organization. So what I would say is don't underestimate what it means to be brought into the organization, to even have the chance to be granted those permissions, even if it took you weeks to get them. And one of the things that could easily be going on here is that you just have a sense of wanting to contribute and get things done. And the speed of work is slower than what you would like it to be. And that was my problem in my early jobs. So I was very impatient. And part of it was just not understanding that, well, there's a pace of work here that people want to follow. And you need to figure that out. You need to appreciate that. So some of that is going on here, where you're plugging into this way of working that's just different.
Yeah.
And there's some adjustment that needs to be made. But to let them know that this has been a concern of yours and that you'd like to be of as much assistance as possible is a good message to share. Okay. But I would recommend you have it as part of an agenda item, not necessarily formally, but you send a note, say, hey, in preparation for, in advance of our call next week or tomorrow or this afternoon, would it be okay to take a few minutes to discuss from your perspective, how the internship is going and what I could be doing to help in the greatest way possible in the remaining weeks. And sure, so just so that there's nothing surprising, like you don't grab the individual and say, hey, wait, do you have 5 more minutes? Because then there's not the attention, you're not going to have the right setting to have that conversation. So when you say that you'd like to add that as a topic, then the person says, okay, I am familiar with this kind of conversation. I know this can take between 5 and 20 minutes. So maybe I won't schedule a back-to-back meeting right after I meet Celine. Well, now is an important time to be networking. So we're talking, here we are in the middle of the summer, where just like in your current internship with Comcast, there are thousands, tens of thousands of interns out there all getting considered and reviewed for full-time opportunities. And meanwhile, the fall recruiting hasn't really started.
Mm-hmm.
So so all of those traditional status quo type of job hunt those type of job seekers are not starting to fill up LinkedIn requests to connect, LinkedIn profiles with requests to connect. No one's doing the campus recruiting right now. But the only reason fall recruiting would be successful for most people was if they had those referrals already in place. It doesn't matter if you're interning. It can help if you're interning at the firm you eventually want to join. Obviously, that's the most direct path to a full-time role. But this is a great time to be networking. So is it too early to apply? Think about it more broadly. Is it too early to have an impact in these companies that you want to join? No, it's not too early to start having conversations, because now that you've got that experience on your resume and you can brand yourself as a Comcast employee, this is the time. This is the time to be sharing that with as many people and as broadly as you can.
Mm-hmm.
So you could, it would not be unreasonable for you to be hitting your weekly invitation limit of 100 people a week, right? It wouldn't be out of the question to be doing that kind of thing, to be reaching out to wherever it is next that you would like to be working. If it's another media firm, right? Okay, maybe it's not 100 connections per week, but starting to get on calls. Again, if you find that your internship now doesn't keep you so busy and that you can actually you have some time to do some networking and do research, yeah, I would be getting on calls with people just like you were doing with Comcast, except now we're talking about the full-time opportunity. People are going to be really interested in you in the sense that they were interested in you as an undergraduate student, right? It's a really good time to get hired in the United States, especially being an undergraduate is great. And then not necessarily a lateral hire, not technically lateral hire, because typically we call a lateral hire someone who's been working for a couple of years and then transfers laterally to another firm. Not exactly that, but you're not just a student anymore. You've got this brand. You've got Comcast. You have a story to tell. Hey, you've just been granted all the permissions and access at Comcast. I mean, that's people don't talk about that. And it's like, oh, you've just been granted access to the data sets that you need. People don't think about it that way, but they know, oh, you at some point were deemed hireable by Comcast. So that means a lot to us. Just like when I had my internships, like, for example, I had my first internship at Goldman Sachs. I was terrible. I was really bad. I couldn't do the things that they were asking me to do. Oh, that internship was a learning experience for me. Oh, these are the things I need to be able to do, right? But for the firms that hired me after that, it wasn't that wasn't what they were seeing. They were seeing that I had that branding. even if it was just an internship and I didn't get the return offer, they saw, oh, Goldman Sachs had offered this person a job at one point. Okay, great. And then, oh, UBS, you'd worked at UBS. Oh, okay. So then those are really great opportunities. Having that branding is, you should always, if you've got the time, now is the time to be doing that. So for example, right now this summer, I'm starting to talk to people about, hey, what's your plan for the fall? I noticed that you're interning, or I noticed that you're not interning now. If you're going to be participating in fall recruiting in any form, now is that critical time to be reaching out. And that's not just me marketing saying we're trying to create, undue concern or get people worried. This is just the way it works. You come into fall recruiting, you either have referrals or you don't. And HR, they're just trying to do their job. Like the HR teams, they want to keep their jobs. They don't want to lose their jobs. And they want to have an easy job. They want it to be easy too. So how do you do that? Well, it's easy to keep my job and make my boss happy if I am first prioritizing all of the referrals that come in for the fall interview slots. So for any hiring needs we have for full-time work, I'm saving myself time, keeping my boss happy, keeping my job by prioritizing all the referrals. And then, if we need more people, or we need to check this box of compliance, okay, we'll post the job. And we might have some resumes coming. And maybe thousands of resumes will pass the computer screen if there is one. But that does not mean that we're going to go into those and do any deep digging. If I have already filled all the interview slots, if in 2 months I'm going to have interviews and I can fill all those interview slots now, kind of in an informal way, I've done my job. I've saved myself so much effort. So just think about, on the other end of that, people are always thinking about, oh, the computer and the applicant tracking systems are so mean. And, don't think about that. Think about the people who are in those positions and what their needs are. And if we can anticipate that, right? Anticipate that these people have bosses and these people have jobs they want to keep and work that they want to have as easy a time at as possible, then it just becomes a natural choice. Of course, I need to go talk to people and get them to know me, get the right people, get the bosses to know me. And now you have all this new language and all this fancy consumer experience language that you can talk about, right?
Yeah, I hope so. I've been updating my resume recently.
You know all this stuff now. So it just, you can talk the talk, walk the walk, and it just becomes, you just are a natural, you can just fit naturally into another customer experience role, for example, or any kind of media analyst, any kind of analyst role. So now is the time. So if we were to relaunch your job hunt, it would be to simply just relaunch the networking.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And still also applying for any job openings.
Yeah, I mean, if you were to start seeing those, and if you haven't really, if you haven't turned on your radar yet, right, and you haven't been checking, now is the time to get back into that. Although I wouldn't expect that you'd see a whole lot at this time, and you might get you might get the wrong information, like, oh, no one's hiring right now, and therefore not be that active, when in fact, everybody's hiring. All the companies that you want to work for either are or will be hiring. It does not matter if they have nothing posted. And that's the whole concept behind the hidden job market, the 隐形职场, is that actually all of these hiring decisions, or most of them, are happening because of the networking that people are doing.
Yeah.
And networking just means, I mean, it's got people, it means different things to different people, but basically right now, all it means is we are mostly invisible for most of the time. No one knows that we exist. It's okay. Some people do. Comcast knows that you exist, right? But it's our job to let the people know, that people that we need to know, people that we want to know that we exist. We have to go out and reach out to them, just like a friend. Like maybe you have a really good friend from high school. Whenever you meet that person, you have a great time together. Things are great. It's just like you saw each other last week, even though it's been a whole year. Now you have friends like that, which normally are not reaching out to you. They're just not. And people are just kind of like that. Most people aren't reaching out. So you just become that person that reaches out, reconnects with your old friends from high school, reaches out to the people in whatever firm so that they can get to know you. And like we've always been doing, we like to start with a couple cold calls and cold networking calls. But through that process, because we're asking for introductions, we can primarily rely on the warm introductions of other people, right? So like not all of your networking calls of the past were always cold calls, right?
No.
Right? Because you were able to take a couple cold calls. One cold call becomes introductions to 3 people.
Yeah.
Same process here.